Welcome to Antique Dust.
Hello and welcome to Antique Dust, and we are dusting down the awesome TV show from 1975, The Changes. Hello and welcome. I am Jonathan.
And I'm Rob.
And together we are
Antique
Antique
Dust.
Dust. Woo!
Woo!
Yay!
Yay.
So, yes, The Changes.
The Changes. What's that strange noise, Jonathan?
Oh, I don't know. I think
It's just making me want to smash things up.
Oh, ooga.
Sorry, I think it's past now. We're fine.
So, if anyone doesn't know what The Changes is, it's a drama series based off the book by Peter Dickinson, and the book is actually a trilogy.
Yes, well, I think in hindsight you call it a trilogy, even though it was actually published in reverse order. So The Weathermongers, which was the first book to be written, actually forms the last book of the trilogy. So there's that book
prequels.
And then a couple of prequels that have been sort of brought together. And published as a trilogy, but in reverse order, so that the chronologically earliest book, The Devil's Children, appears first in the trilogy, even though it was written last. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a little bit confusing.
If anyone doesn't know what the general storyline is, something mysterious has happened in the UK, which means all the population suddenly turn against technology.
Yes, there's a mysterious noise that emanates around the country, and then people go a bit doolally, start smashing up televisions and toasters and bicycles for some reason. I would have thought bicycles would have been all right.
I would have
really.
thought, because that's more of a mechanical thing.
Yeah, but hey,
but it had
we go.
moving parts. Ooh.
Yeah, and also not just that they want to smash them up, but they develop a hatred and an aversion.
The wickedness.
The wickedness. And even talking about technology creates this weird effect on people.
So the story centres around a girl called Nikki Gore, who lives quite a nice, privileged little lifestyle with mummy and daddy. Mummy is apparently pregnant.
She did seem a little bit. So I mean, Sonia Graham, the actress who played Mother, I think she was about 45 when she made this. So in 1975, a 45-year-old
would be like a grandparent.
Yeah, that would be really, that would be quite a risky pregnancy.
And Dad looked was a little bit elderly as well, wasn't he?
Yes, maybe it was just the pipe.
Yeah, I mean, the first opening scene starts with Nikki doing her homework for an English test the following day.
Because she's good with languages. That's important later.
She's very good with languages. And she is sat in the living room, and her dad is there puffing on his pipe with the news on in the background.
Which is actually, when you consider that this was like sort of before tea time, later on slot on children's television. And actually, when you think about it, much of the audience
would have been quite young.
Would have been doing the same thing as Nikki and her dad were doing, homework, watching television. So that's quite, and I think that's quite a neat bit of direction.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause people can correlate and automatically hook into the protagonist, which is Nikki. Her dad complains of a headache, and the window gets opened. Then that strange noise emanates.
Yeah. And meanwhile, on the television news, we see there's all kinds of weird weather phenomena that's started in the last. Weird weather stuff that has started in the last few days.
And then suddenly, Daddy gets up and then starts smashing the television.
Yes, and then everyone starts
smashing things,
smashing technology,
and they have a right rumble in the kitchen with throwing the sort of the toaster in the blender and the toaster and killing
the dishwasher as well, which I was very impressed with. 1975, a dishwasher. They were
really wealthy.
They were a super wealthy family.
They were super wealthy. Although they did seem to live in a sort of a maisonette.
In Bristol,
apparently. Yes.
It was never named, but we deduced it was Bristol just by the picture of the Severn Bridge, etc., popping up.
Yeah, and so the scene then cuts to the morning after, where Mum's saying, "Oh, the milk's going to go off. The fridge isn't working."
Well, there's no electricity. Presumably, the electricity generators have been smashed by the.
So serves up some white sliced bread and sort of a mug of something with some milk in it.
Be cordial.
But God knows how they actually managed to heat up any hot water, because maybe the gas had been switched off as well. But maybe that hadn't. I don't know. Maybe they had a cylinder or something.
Overthinking, Jonathan. Overthinking.
So then Mummy and Nikki have a little bit of a row because Nikki wants to go to school, and Mummy says, "No, you can't possibly go out. Daddy's going out to find something, see what's going on." But Nikki then goes to school and walks through these desolated streets with people still smashing up technology, and
turning
cars.
a
Hillman.
A Hillman imp.
I think a burgundy Hillman imp or a dark-coloured Hillman imp. That must have I mean, they did use lots of scenes of that Hillman being smashed to bits.
Yeah, I'm assuming that they ram raided a few junkyards to find...
It looked like it was in quite good order as well.
Well, it was probably broken.
It probably was.
They didn't have the budget to smash up a brand new car.
So she arrives at school, and the school is all boarded up with chains, and it says, "School closed until further notice." It's very reminiscent, isn't it? I mean, it's like, it's like a pandemic.
Yeah, a pandemic of smashing up
technology.
Yeah.
So Nikki then goes home, and parents are then packing up to go to the coast because they hear it's safe in France. But there's no way of actually getting to the coast because all the public transport's been burnt.
They might get a cart though.
They might get a cart, but they don't.
But they don't have one.
They're not wealthy.
They missed the last.
They could have traded the dishwasher in, but they broke that.
Well, who would have bought it?
I don't know.
Technology. They have to take
the
it to
wickedness France. Of keeping your pots and pans clean.
Yeah.
The wickedness.
So mum and they traipse off all together as a group, but then suddenly Nikki sees the allure toaster or something. I can't remember.
She sees she's walking down the streets as a family, and Nikki sees a group of people. The sudden weird
the noise
happens.
Cue sound effect.
And then she picks up a big spanner and starts hitting a Hillman. The same Hillman, again with a group of other people. And Mummy and Daddy then get disappeared. Then we have like a sort of a. It was quite anxiety laden, wasn't it? When she was trying to find her parents and the pet.
Yeah, it was a well directed.
Yeah, Mummy and Daddy. Mummy says, "Where's Nikki? Oh no, we can't possibly go." And Daddy says, "Oh, sit here. I'll go and find her." And then there's a couple of scenes where Nikki sees Dad and then loses him, and then she heads back to the house. So, which we'd think natural, but Daddy goes to Mother and says, "I can't find her. We'll come back for her. She's quite resilient."
Yeah, there was a slightly callous bit of parenting.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. I didn't want a girl. Hopefully, the next one's a boy.
Yeah.
So then, and we have a few more scenes with Mum and Dad, but that is the last time we actually see them.
Yeah, so we see Mum and Dad. We've got that kind of dual narrative going on. We've got Nikki
at
home trying to stay alive and raiding pubs and so on for food, for cream soda, not for beer. Let's be
cream soda and crisps.
Meanwhile, Mum and Dad are sort of part of a convoy, including someone carrying a carpet or at least seemed to be a carpet for some reason.
Yeah, maybe it was a very expensive shag pile.
But then they make their way to the coast, presumably Solway Estuary or something like that.
To go across to France.
And then there's this little rowboat, which I thought, oh crikey, how are they going to get across to France? From Bristol in a rowboat. But anyway, let's not worry about that.
And then that's the last time we see
them.
With rather elderly Mother cradling her belly.
Her
belly, because she's getting
she's getting twinges. So clearly the baby is on its way, which is another reason. The plan, don't forget the plan, well, not quite as callous as we were making out, because the plan was that they would get to the coast, then she would go on the boat to France, meanwhile Dad would go back home to find Nikki. But then once the baby's she's in labour, that plan has to be abandoned because clearly, she can't be left alone. So they both climb into this dinghy, and
that's the last
we see them.
And Nikki she survives. She waits around about 10 days, but Mummy and Daddy don't come back. And then she's out foraging for food, so she seems quite resilient, and she doesn't really seem. She's not very. There's no sort of emotion.
No, it's a very emotionless performance.
She's yeah. I think if it was done now, I think they would probably
they'd be emoting left,
they'd
right,
be
and centre.
emoting left, right, and centre.
Absolutely, and there'd be a more obvious romantic subplot as well.
Yes. We'll get to that in a little bit. So Nikki is sort of wandering the streets, foraging for food in sort of buildings and sort of abandoned buildings, and then she bumps into an elderly man who says, "You need to get away from here," because he's cradling his cat. He's very old.
Yeah. Yeah, and I must admit, when we first started watching that scene,
I thought the cat was dead.
Yeah, we did think the cat was dead.
I was very upset about the cat.
I know this is what the continuity announcer described as a drama for older children, but I was thinking surely a dead cat is pushing the envelope.
But then it moved.
So
we were quite happy.
It was a sleepy cat rather than a dead cat.
In fairness, I think the cat probably had more sort of acting emotion than the person that played Nikki. I don't think she's been in much else since, has she really?
Yeah, she's been Victoria Williams. She's done a few things since then. I don't think she's done anything recently, according to Internet Movie Database, obviously.
Yeah.
But she's done the usual, the Casualty, Holby City, Coronation Street, Brookside, that kind of usual stuff. She was in Bedrooms and Hallways, which is one of your favourite movies, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was she in that?
I think she was Lady Owner number 2 or something like that. So she wasn't.
Yes, because Bedrooms and Hallways is it's a
Don't get distracted.
No,
Don't get distracted.
Yeah,
okay. We'll do a blog.
We'll do that. We'll do one on Bedrooms and Hallways.
Bedrooms and Hallways. One of Jonathan's
very
favourite movies.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, very very funny.
Anyway,
so so it rolls along nicely. She then befriends a some Sikhs.
So there's an extended Sikh family, lots and they're making their way. And
in a caravan of
yeah. Which for 1975,
very forward thinking. It was very sort of, and so Nikki befriends one of the so asked if she can go along to go to the coast so she can go and meet her parents. There's a little bit of reluctance from them because they've got the matriarch of the family which is being pulled along in this sort of vegetable cart, like a street market cart thing where she's being pulled, and she is obviously the matriarch of the family and rules the roost. And initially she says no, but then Nikki warns them, don't go down one way because there's death and destruction, because the old man that's given the warning with the cat
with the plague
saying that there's a problem with the water and there is issues with people dying in that area. He won't go with her because he's too old and he's got his cats to look after. So Nikki goes, okay then, bye, and skips off, and then she bumps into the Sikhs. So she warns them, they appreciate the warning, and then they allow her to join.
And also they start dabbling with mechanics.
Trying
to get this I don't know, with a nice
it was a Land Rover, a yellow Land Rover,
trying to get it started.
And Nikki has
her reaction to that, and then tries to attack them and so on. So there's two. I guess there's there's a bit of a mystery there. It's
not affecting
the changes
ethnicities.
Aren't affecting the Sikhs in the way they're affecting Nikki.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a mystery there. What's going on?
So
but also they recognise that Nikki can be a bit of a barometer, at giving them a clue as to when they might be doing something that is going to attract violence or retribution from people who are affected.
So it is like having a canary down a mine sort of thing. So she joins them, and then they follow along the caravan to find safety for the Sikh family. And then it was really interesting because they go through a village, and in this village there's complete hostility to the Sikhs. So there was a lot of racism there, and it was very evident in 1970s that there was a lot of racism. I mean, I was brought up in London, and there was hostility to any ethnicity and everything. I mean, I was quite in a privileged situation because my best friend was called Joanna, and her father was from Pakistan, and her mother was Scottish, a white Scottish lady. So she was mixed race, but she had sort of like that sort of not hatred, but sort of the dislike towards it. But because I was brought up 2 doors down from them, and we were in each other's houses all the time, sort of that sort of thing. It's sort of I had an appreciation for it, and it was But so it was it resonated with me that, and. But so the story rolls along. So I think the first 4 episodes, it's there's 10 24-minute episodes.
Yeah, 10 episodes, average length about 24, 25 minutes.
I mean, the first story, the events happen. She joins the Sikhs. The Sikhs then...
so they find a farm, basically.
They find an abandoned farm.
And decide that that's probably a good place for them to stay for a little while. It's near a village, but not too near, and is protected from the village by the
pylons,
bad wires.
The bad wires, which are the pylons.
More of which later. And they have lots of skills around blacksmithing and so on, and they kind of use that as an opportunity to set up some kind of trade with the villagers. The villagers don't like them, and they're not happy about it.
They call them the Devil's Children.
The Devil's Children. But the skills that they have, repairing their agricultural implements.
Because obviously they're using old methods of hand sort of cultivating the land,
hand tilling the soil.
So Nikki works as sort of the go-between, and so she's at first she's very reluctant to go underneath the pylons, the wickedness. However, she builds up some sort of resistance to it.
Yeah, and that's something that we sort of see as the story goes on, that
the diminishing
effects with young people anyway. There's a sort of diminishing effect of the changes. But yes, so for a while it's all very nice and jolly, and there's a bit of banter between the
appreciation of the workmanship
and all the rest of it. And then
the bad guys come.
The robbers arrive, led by Mr. Meeker from Rent-A-Ghost,
on a horse, and so it looks like. Obviously,
I should say that's Edward Brayshaw, the actor, played Mr. Meeker.
There's factions that are obviously created for people to up their importance, and these people are just taking over villages. And to get control over the villages, they're using brute force, and they're kidnapping all the children.
So they kill the village leader. We don't get to see it, thankfully. I think it's a little bit more graphic in the book, I seem to remember, but we don't get to see that happening. But all the children are rounded up and taken
to the schoolhouse,
and they're locked, and they pile up lots of flammable material, and the threat is that we will set fire to this and kill all your children, which actually is quite a brutal idea for a kids TV
for a kids
show.
Thing, but it creates more interest and what have you, and it is quite. It's very, very threatening. I mean, that's what you feel in like an apocalyptic time, where you can have factions that are going to take control. So law and order disappears. So all the children are kidnapped. Nikki witnesses this. She speaks to the Sikhs, and they have a plan to rescue.
Yes, they've been busy. We've seen them busy practicing. They've been making swords and daggers to defend themselves,
because they are very sort of
physical.
And
we've seen them practicing with all this. So this is their opportunity then to mount a rescue.
So Nikki and her friend, who's about similar age, part of the Sikh family, they think, right, Nikki, you have to get in. So they're reluctant to get Nikki involved because it's quite a dangerous thing.
But
however,
they need to rescue the children
on side,
and they think that Nikki would be a good person to do that because she would be less threatening
to do so.
To the children.
So Nikki and the Sikh girl go and do it, and the Sikh girl runs off with her. She's been told no, she can't get involved. But the Sikh girl's a really, really good sort of conduit as well, because the matriarch of the family is a storyteller. So in the evening, before they all retire to bed, she tells sort of fables and stories. And the Sikh girl, when they get into the schoolhouse, children are obviously a little bit distressed, but the Sikh girl grabs their attention by telling them this a story.
Keeps them calm
and occupied while
Nikki's on the lookout.
While Nikki's on the lookout looking for an opportunity to get away from it, and then the Sikhs come in to to fight the men and get rid of the robbers.
And there's a big fight scene on horseback. Mr. Meeker's on horseback, not Dobbin the pantomime horse. Unfortunately,
thank goodness.
But,
no Timothy Claypole.
It's more of a dray horse really on the back of it, so it's slightly weird.
Needs must.
So there's this big fight, and of course, inevitably, the robbers are routed.
Yes.
And the children are rescued, and the villagers join with the.
Well, the children are rescued, and Nicky sort of they filter the children out, arm them with stones, so if they see a robber, they can aloft the stones to stone the robbers, which they do. They chase off one of the robbers that comes behind a tree with a big wicked chain, and the robbers set fire to the schoolhouse, thinking the children are inside. And then the villagers see the smoke coming up, and then the villagers go in there thinking the children are being burnt alive, and then they realise the children have been rescued by the devil's children, the two girls, and then the villagers then arm, because two of the Sikhs have been killed in the tussle, and then the villagers go up there, and then it seems to be so they chase off those, they get rid of the robbers, and that sort of ends that story, because then the Sikhs think it's time for Nicky to go to follow her journey. To
segue neatly into the second book. Heart's Ease is the name of the second book. So it turns out that Nicky has an aunt who lives somewhere in the Cotswolds, and that's the right place for her to go. So
she goes off on quite a rickety horse cart.
Yeah, and we can't think what could possibly go wrong with a wobbly wheel.
So she's being carted along on that.
But they're not going through Shipton.
No, because
Shipton people are a bit weird in Shipton.
Very weird in Shipton.
But sadly, the wheel falls off. And the carter runs for help. Nicky's been rendered unconscious, but before the carter returns, she wakes up and wanders off.
into Shipton. And she stumbles. She goes into a barn and falls asleep. And that's when we meet the Shipton High Sheriff, or self-nominated.
Oh, the weirdos.
Is that Davy? Is it Davy?
Davy Gordon.
Gordon.
Mr. Gordon. Mr.
Mad
Gordon.
Davy.
Because for some reason, Nicky manages to take the break. There's a wicked tractor in this.
Well, she doesn't seem to be affected by the machinery, does she?
No, she seems to be pretty immune to the effect of the changes.
She falls asleep, and
she hears voices. She climbs. I think she tries to try and hide in the tractor. Ends up knocking the brake off, so it then rumbles along and knocks over some petrol cans, and then she's rumbled.
And then Davy declares her a witch, and she needs to be trialed. Trialed. A witch trial.
I mean, tried.
Well, it's a trial.
It was a trial. She wasn't trialed. That's what you do when you try something out.
So
anyway,
so naturally it goes along with that. She gets tried. She gets declared a witch. She gets put up in another schoolhouse loft.
So there's lots of schoolhouses. But the family who owned the barn that she was caught in, it's brother and sister, Jonathan and Margaret, and mum and dad. Dad is in the thrall of Davy Gordon. Mum is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Jonathan and Margaret are a bit shocked and taken aback by this turn of events, that this young girl has been tried as a witch and is going to be stoned to death.
I mean, obviously, Davy has created control.
Yeah, he's a religious maniac who has used his powers of manipulation and influence to take over this village and turn the villagers into equally maniacal religious people.
In fairness, I really like Margaret and Jonathan, because I think they could actually act. The people, because Margaret got very emotional over a horse, and me,
Scrubs the horse.
So they rescue her. It rollicks along really nicely.
So there's a caper involving the tractor, because clearly Jonathan is not affected,
and he hasn't been affected.
He was a mechanic in the docks. That's a plot point.
Mm-hmm.
A mechanic in the Gloucester docks, and was very mechanically minded, and is really miserable at having been
parted,
forced back to the family
to look after the
farm to look after the cows. So they mount a rescue operation, a bit of a reverse of fortune, really. Now that Nikki's gone from rescuer to someone requiring to be rescued.
Yes, and so she gets rescued. She can't walk very far because she's hurt a leg, but she can't work out which leg she's actually hurt. But hey, that's beside the point. She gets rescued. Jonathan declares that there's a tugboat which has been fully renovated.
That's what he was working on.
That's what he's working
the changes.
on. He's ensured everything is working totally fine.
Yes.
And it is stocked up with food. And the general plan was he was going to escape with his sister. Now, his sister really obviously she likes her ponies, and she actually quite likes the life.
Yeah. So Margaret doesn't really want to escape. So she decides that she's going to stay at home while Jonathan and Nikki escape on to France.
To France.
We're still going to France.
They're still going to France. So to reunite with the parents. So they go off that way, and then Margaret gets found out, and she gets.
So Nikki and Jonathan, they're on the Heartsease, which is kind of hard to say, really. Heartsease, the tug, and they're chugging on down the Gloucester Canal.
They're planning to go at nightfall to get through, so people don't notice. But Margaret unfortunately lets the cat out of the bag when she's threatened by Davy.
She's threatened because they found. After rescuing Nikki, Jonathan set fire to the schoolhouse to cover their tracks a little bit. But unfortunately,
he left his
pen knife with his initials on it. So Davy Gordon puts two and two together, and then there's already been some dialogue around how Jonathan and Margaret were off together, trying to see off some cattle rustlers and all the rest of it. So he quickly realises that Margaret must be involved in the plot, uses some very
is very threatening,
crude and threatening behaviour. So eventually, Margaret does divulge some of the plan, not everything, but some of the plan. But then even though she's locked in her bedroom, she manages to escape, and Davy Gordon and the villagers with their pitchforks and so on.
They have a ramble down to the
they're sauntering down on
and stop off for a couple of beers.
Yeah, well,
a local pub.
While Margaret is on scrubs, galloping down, and manages to warn Jonathan that they're rumbled and they need to leave ASAP.
And they arrange because they've got all these swing bridges. So they arrange for her to go forward on scrubs to undo the swing bridges to get out, so it's easy, so they can go full point ahead. And the local villagers highlight this to Davy and his gang, and they go to a bridge. Then there's lots of nonsense with regards to setting a smoke bomb off or setting a fire on top of the boat to look like it's going to be abandoned. They have a switchover of clothes between Margaret and Nikki.
Margaret is pretending to be Nikki and galloping off on the horse, so to act as a
decoy,
a diversion, and get the to get the villagers to follow her on the horse.
Unfortunately, Davy stays on the swing bridge on his horse, and I think this is where where Margaret and Jonathan's dad suddenly thinks, no, this is wrong, and pushes him off has a tussle. He falls off the horse over the bridge and into the canal, and he can't swim.
Yeah. Now this is an interesting bit of one of the many diversions from the source material, but actually I seem to remember that in the book, Margaret on the horse comes galloping along the bridge and knocks Davy Gordon into the water. So they made a bit of a switch there so that
it was more children friendly.
Yeah, so it's probably better that the father has a tussle rather than
because it's adults having a tussle.
Yeah, rather than Margaret knocking him off the bridge with her.
And plus,
horse.
It lines it up that so Margaret will be forgiven when because she's heading back home to be with her mother, and when Dad goes home, that will be all okay.
Yeah.
So you've pretty much sort of signposting all of that. The boat then escapes. Davy's been killed, so that's the end of that particular
got the bridge
story.
open. Father opens the bridge to let Jonathan and Nikki
get through and pass
into the last bridge
and into the estuary,
into the Severn estuary,
and
then we segue into the third book, The Weathermongers.
The Weathermongers, and the boat suddenly develops an engine fault, but it can't actually.
Well, it's a mysterious engine fault.
There's
thunder,
but
there's
in a clear
lightning,
sky,
and there's some noise. The noise comes back, and there's something
not right.
Something not right, and then there's this bolt of. Do you have a bolt of lightning? Or?
A bolt of lightning hits. They drift to the shore so they can they start the engine. He starts the engine. They set off again from shore, and it gets stuck with lightning, and then they have to jump in because
the whole thing blows up.
And then they swim to the shore, and then they're drying out under a tree, and then they get discovered by a helpful chap.
Yeah,
and which is very nice because there's a couple that had moved from London to live off grid.
Yeah,
and
they were clearly sort of harnessing the whole kind of new, hippie, new age kind of thing that I guess was a thing back in the mid-70s.
And it's more and more popular now. But they'd moved out to Wales to live in this cottage off grid, so they were self-sufficient and everything. But they did that before all this happened.
And they're all very nice.
They are very nice. They're very welcoming. They give food. They give comfort. They lend them a couple of horses. They mention about the hill, where everything comes from the hill, but they don't really want to go to the hill.
And they basically they serve their purpose, which is a bit of exposition and some more information to propel the story along. They talk about the necromancer's weather. They talk about the mysterious energy force or power source beyond the hills. So there's enough information being dropped into
Nikki
to give a reason for Nikki and Jonathan then to move on to the next
adventure.
Phase of the adventure.
So because Jonathan's saying, well, should we not get to France? And Nikki says, no, I need to see what's going on, what's caused this, because if I can put it right, then she's obviously putting herself in the hero role. If I can put it right, then I want to put it right.
Yeah, but she's also, I think, maybe that's what I picked up there was that she's being drawn. There's an element there that she's being pulled
to that direction
towards whatever it is that we're assuming is the source of the changes.
So they get to the hill. The horses bolt. They then walk to the quarry where.
So they find they wander through the woods. They hear wolves or dogs howling that we don't see, and they're a bit sort of freaked out by that. And then they find themselves in a quarry.
Yeah, and
they meet Mr. Furbelow.
Mr. Furbelow, he lives in a caravan.
Well, he doesn't. He lives in he goes to the caravan, but actually he lives in a cave.
In the cave, where all the happening happens. So we have a more exposition where he says that they were mining, they heard some noises, and since then it's all gone to pot.
Yeah, and they've been warned. Merlinus sum, etc., etc., etc. in Latin.
So it goes back to the stories of Merlin.
Yeah. So they go into the cave with Mr. Furbelow and they have this conversation, but then suddenly the noise comes. I think there's an electric torch involved.
Yeah.
The noise comes. Mr. Furbelow is talking about how he won't like it and he'll be angry. We don't know who he is. But there's definitely something weird going on. He ushers Nikki and Jonathan out of the cave and shuts the door behind them. So then they go into the caravan, which he's still using, and he was the clerk of works of the quarry. So he was there when the blasting operation that seems to have, essentially they find his diary, where he chronicles conveniently the whole
event,
exposition, bit more exposition from Mr. Furbelow's diary. So they sort of found something in the cave, and he has been pulled into this kind of I don't know how you would describe it.
He's the guard. He's self-appointed himself as the guardian. However,
and he's tried to use. They found a power source, and everybody else got freaked out and right and left. But Mr. Furbelow was pulled towards it, and he tried to use the power, but he inadvertently ended up waking something up.
Yes,
that should have been left
and
sleeping.
It's so that they sort of get him out of the. So they have through some nonsense get him out.
They trick him.
They get him out of the cave. He falls down. They put him in the caravan, and then they go back in, and they go through the caverns and what have you with their sort of lanterns, lit lanterns, and there's a dialogue between which we don't really know. We don't really hear the dialogue.
We don't hear the dialogue.
We hear,
Nicky finds this big rock with a mysterious
pulsing
glow that we've seen in the closing titles of all the episodes up without any explanation
of what it is.
But now we see this strange rock, and there is a voice emanating, but a very muffled voice, and it is saying Merlin assume, etc., 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 which Nicky, because of her facility with languages, which includes Latin, it seems, has translated as meaning something like, I'm Merlin, don't wake me up, or something like that. Or if you wake me, you'll disturb the balance of the world, which is essentially what has happened. He's been awoken, or the force has been awoken, and the balance of the world has been disturbed.
So Nicky
has some kind of psychic dialogue and tells
it's
in
not his
commons Merlin that some the balance of the world has been disturbed and it's not his time. And in that dialogue, it seems that the force that we've associated with Merlin in the book is actually Merlin. Not a force, but hey-ho.
In the story, it sounds like Merlin was strong enough to control the force when
and that
he
was the source of Merlin's powers. And it sort of seems that Nicky is in that kind of mould of being...
Right, Mr. Furbelow wasn't. Not. He was a weak mind.
And that's when it all went to shit.
So everything starts rumbling. The rocks start falling down, so it's like enclosing on itself. So Jonathan and Nicky run out of the cave while everything goes brrr, and sort of lots of boulders come down and everything. So Merlin is sort of rebooting and sort of going.
He's going back to sleep.
He's going back to on standby mode.
Yes,
and then
everything goes back to normal.
And then they get to the caravan. Mr. Furbelow was waking up and cannot have any recollection of anything.
He has no memory of what's happened.
And then they jauntily skip off as if everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it, because Nicky has this complete belief that the parents are going to come back, everything's going to be okay, and it ends.
Yeah.
And it was, okay.
Yeah.
I can just imagine as a child, the thing like, I'm just going to bob to the loo, or Mummy's calling me to have my fish fingers, fish finger and beans, and you go back and you think, what have I missed?
Yeah. So,
it was an abrupt ending.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess we should talk a little bit about the production side of the changes, and as I've alluded to several times, it is a really pretty abridged version of
quite a mammoth book.
Yeah, it's a fairly sizable set of books. So it's been fairly, I think freely adapted by Anna Hume is the term that's sometimes used.
Bandied around.
Not least because there is a certain acceleration and abruptness to the resolution of the story. It does all kind of resolve itself really, really quickly.
So they ran out of film.
Well, it's not so much. Well, maybe they ran out of budget, or maybe there was less story to tell, because most of the first half is taken up with the first book about the third book, depending on the way that you want to think about it, around the adventures with the Sikhs,
the Devil's Children.
The Devil's Children, whereas the other, the sort of like the second half, it was split into two blocks of 5. The second half is a pretty condensed version of Heartsease and the the Weathermonger. So it's quite a compressed bit of storytelling, and some of it, what we have to recognise is that Nikki Gore is not a character in either of those books. So there's whole subplots that have been abandoned, and Nikki has been put is taking the role of several different characters, and I think part of that compression means that there has to be a bit of exposition and stuff like that to propel the story along.
What I really liked about it is it starts off and it is quite disturbing, and there is that unease going through it, which even watching it now, sort of 44 years later. 45 years later.
Oh
my gosh!
You've never seen it before. This was your first.
Yeah, it's first airing, and it did capture. The first few episodes really are quite tense. They are very plot driven, although Nikki isn't really emoting too much. But then again, you could maybe say that, well, her motivation was that she was the conduit for Merlin, or the power.
And you could say that perhaps it was part of the effect of the changes on her. So, do you want to hear my changes story?
What's your changes story?
Okay, so I saw the changes at its first airing in 1975. I would have been
6.
Well, I would actually. My 6th birthday would have been between episodes 1 and 2 at its first airing. Now, 5-6 years old is too young to actually really lay down any kind of significant memories. So I was in a really peculiar position of knowing that I'd seen a TV show that had actually had a big impact on me, and I had some very sort of strong snapshot memories, but I had no idea what it was about, what it was called. I all it left me with was some strong impressions plus a lifelong uneasiness around electricity pylons. And it wasn't until the advent of the internet and Google and so on, and I'd sort of a few creative Google searches using whatever fragments of memory that I had about it, that I eventually worked out that it was the changes, and I found a few fragments on YouTube, and that confirmed it, because it sort of reinforced some of my vague memories about it. But this is the first time I've actually seen it since. I think, well, it's not actually. I think I also remember watching it. It was repeated the next year, and I've got vague memories of watching it as on the reruns as well. But I've not. It's been 45 years since I've actually seen it. I've read the books. Once I tracked it down and worked out what it was, I thought, well, I'll get the books, and I've read them. But just really really odd that I had such a strong impressions from this TV show without the foggiest idea what it was about, who was in it, what it was called.
But it is unnerving. It is an unnerving thing.
Helped by the music, I have to say.
The music I really
like. The soundtrack
liked.
is really good. Paddy Kingsland, one of the mainstays of the BBC Radiophonics Workshop, using a mixture of synth plus a small band, creating a really evocative sound.
It was very emotive, wasn't it? So it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. Some of it was a little bit hokey, but it's of its time. But for its time, it was very probably forward thinking.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't the only person who left an impression on of the older children. I was too young to watch it. It was definitely, I was not in the age group to watch it. But once there are many people of my age, or probably a bit older, who have very strong memories of the changes.
I mean, the DVD we got was the BFI. It was a BFI version of it. Unfortunately, there's sadly not many. There's no extras. There's just
some still photography. I think there's scope. There's probably scope for some kind of documentary
extras. I think
on it.
Potentially it could.
But I think it was a very groundbreaking. You know, what we would say now, it's very much in the mould of what we now think of as the YA, young adult, dystopian. It's like Hunger. You know, it's almost like Hunger Games or. The Maze Runner.
It is very much along those lines where you've got the protagonist, which is a strong female, and her journey. And I think, in fairness, it would probably be really good if they revisit it and they did an up-to-date version with regards to technology, with the sort of with the whole internet and everything collapsing on that way. I think it would make quite an interesting concept.
I think so. For me, I think if there was ever a suggestion of, no, it wouldn't be. I don't think it would be remaking it. I think it would be reimagining it, and perhaps in a less tightly compressed way.
I mean, in fairness,
be more respectful. I'm not saying it was disrespectful, but having perhaps a bit more respect for the source material. You know, perhaps reflecting the fact that actually it's not the Nikki Gore story throughout the whole thing. There are other characters, because the whole idea of the weathermonger, of some sort of special powers that people have started to develop with the effect of the changes that they can then begin to influence weather. You know, all of those subplots that are abandoned actually are really quite interesting. It would be quite interesting to explore that perhaps a little bit more.
Or maybe a trilogy of films,
or maybe a Netflix.
Netflix. If you're listening to this,
if you're listening to Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Yes, Amazon Prime. Yes.
Other streaming services are available,
but those are the two main ones. But yeah, I think it would really work because it was really good. We binged it over 2 nights, and I really enjoyed it. And I say that's quite peculiar because I know some of Rob's suggestions of what
are you saying, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, most of my stuff is just pulp nonsense.
Yeah, all of your stuff is pretty much the same story being retold many times, but my stuff is very diverse and unusual and challenging.
Yes, you're diverse and interesting, sweetie.
Yes. There's only so many times you can watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off without wanting to throw a shoe at the television.
John Hughes films, amazing. So, anyway, we would love to know what you thought about this series. Unfortunately, it's not available on YouTube, so you would actually have to invest in the DVD. But it is worth it. It is really. And so we would love to let you know. We are on all social media platforms at Antique Dust. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Rob.
And together we are Antique Dust. Woo. And next week we are doing Chucky. Woo!
Are we?
Yes, we're doing Chucky. Yes.
Okay.
Hurrah!
Okay. Well, I'm just off to smash a toaster.
Oh, really? Oh, not the Duelet?
No, not the Duelet, obviously.
You can get the one we've got free in the Gus and Kay's catalogue.
Yay!
Woo! Anyway, from Jonathan and Rob, we will wish you a good day and let us know what you think. Anyway, bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been an Antique Dust production.